Why does your neck keep tightening when everything you've tried has been aimed directly at your neck? The stretches, the pillows, the posture reminders taped to your monitor, all of it pointed at the cervical spine, the top 7 vertebrae, the place where the pain lives, and yet the pain returns, every time. Here's the question worth sitting with. What if the neck was never the problem? What if the origin of that forward pull, that constant compression at the base of your skull, starts at the other end of your spine entirely, at the sacrum, that broad triangular bone just above your tailbone? Because there's a 90-second movement at the sacrum that decompresses the cervical spine from below, lifts it without ever touching the neck. I watched this pattern for years before I could articulate it cleanly. A woman in her early 60s, retired teacher, chronic neck stiffness for over a decade. She'd been through cervical adjustments, massage therapy, ergonomic assessments. Her neck would loosen for a few days, then seize again. Same cycle, every time. Then her physiotherapist, almost as an afterthought, assessed her sacral mobility, found it was essentially frozen, locked in a position that was cascading compensations upward through every single vertebra. 6 weeks of sacral mobilization, focused entirely below the waist, and the neck stiffness that had persisted for 12 years began dissolving. She hadn't touched her neck once. That result doesn't make intuitive sense until you understand the chain connecting the bottom of the spine to the top. And I want to give you the movement itself before we go deeper into the mechanics, because this is something you can begin with today. The tailbone tilt has 3 versions depending on your situation. If you spend most of your day seated, at a desk, in a car, at a table, this is the version that addresses the pattern most directly. Sit at the front edge of your chair, both feet flat, hip width apart. Place your hands on your thighs. The movement is small and slow. Roll your pelvis forward, letting the tailbone tip backward and the lower back develop a gentle arch. You're not thrusting your chest out. You're not crunching your shoulders back. The entire movement originates at the sacrum. Everything above it is a passenger. Hold that position for 30 seconds, then release back to neutral. Repeat twice more. 3 rounds, 30 seconds each, 90 seconds total. If you're someone who wakes up stiff, the neck feels compressed first thing in the morning, and the day never fully loosens it, the supine version works with gravity instead of against it. Lie on your back, knees bent, feet flat. Place a rolled towel about the thickness of your wrist under your sacrum, not under your lower back. Lower, right at the bony plate above the tailbone. Let your body weight settle onto the towel. You'll feel a gentle anterior tilt happening passively. Gravity does the work. Stay for 90 seconds, uninterrupted. When you stand up afterward, the spine has had a chance to reorganize without muscular effort. For those dealing with acute neck discomfort right now, the kind where turning your head costs you, standing may be the least provocative entry point. Stand with your back against a wall, feet about 6 inches forward. Let the back of your head touch the wall if it can. If it can't, that itself is information about how far the compensatory chain has progressed. Tuck your tailbone slightly under, then slowly release it, allowing the lower back to arch away from the wall by about a finger's width. That release at the sacrum will create a subtle chain reaction you can feel moving upward through the thoracic spine. Hold for 30 seconds. 3 rounds. In all 3 versions, the instruction is the same. The sacrum moves, everything else follows. The neck is never the target. The neck is the beneficiary. Now, what is this movement doing inside the spine, at the level of bone and connective tissue? This section matters because the mechanism explains why the effect propagates over 24 vertebrae rather than staying local. The sacrum sits between the 2 wings of the pelvis, wedged into the iliac bones at the sacroiliac joints. Its base, the top surface where it meets the 5th lumbar vertebra, sits at an angle relative to horizontal. In an upright mobile spine, that angle is approximately 30 degrees. This is called the sacral base angle, and it is the single most consequential postural measurement in the human skeleton. Every degree of change at the sacral base produces a compensatory adjustment in the vertebral segments above. The lumbar spine curves to accommodate the sacral angle. The thoracic spine curves to compensate for the lumbar. The cervical spine curves to compensate for the thoracic. And the skull positions itself to keep the eyes level with the horizon, regardless of what every other segment is doing below it. When the sacrum locks into a posterior tilt, which happens progressively with sustained sitting, because the seated position rolls the pelvis backward and flattens the sacral angle, the entire compensatory chain reverses. Lumbar lordosis decreases. The thoracic spine rounds forward to compensate, and the cervical spine juts forward to keep the eyes level. This is the mechanical origin of forward head posture. The head didn't decide to migrate forward. It was pushed there by a chain of compensations that began at the sacrum. Jean Dubousset, the French orthopedic surgeon who developed the concept of the cone of economy in the 1990s, mapped this relationship with precision. His framework demonstrated that the body maintains balance within a narrow cone of gravitational tolerance. When the sacral base shifts, the cone tilts, and every vertebral segment repositions itself to stay within the cone's boundaries. The cervical spine, being the highest and most mobile segment, absorbs the largest displacement. Dubousset's work, conducted at the Hôpital Saint-Vincent de Paul in Paris, established that pelvic parameters predict cervical alignment more accurately than any measurement taken at the neck itself. Serge Gracovetsky, working at Concordia University in Montreal, approached the same problem from a biomechanical perspective. His spinal engine theory proposed that the spine functions as an integrated mechanical unit. The sacrum is not simply a base, but an active driver of spinal movement. Gracovetsky demonstrated through mathematical modeling and clinical observation that sacral motion propagates cranially through the vertebral column via coupled rotation and lateral bending. Restrict sacral motion, and the entire system above it compensates, not gracefully, but through incremental distortion that accumulates over years. The connective tissue pathway is equally specific. The sacrotuberous ligament, which anchors the sacrum to the ischial-tuberosity, is continuous with the thoracolumbar fascia. The thoracolumbar fascia extends cranially to merge with the deep layers of the posterior cervical musculature. From there, the nuchal ligament, a dense fascial band running from the 7th cervical vertebra to the base of the skull, completes the connection. This is a single, continuous fascial chain from the sacrum to the occiput. Tension at the sacrum transmits through this chain. Release at the sacrum transmits through this chain. The neck doesn't know the difference between a local stretch and a release that originated 4 feet below it. The fascia carries the message regardless of where it starts. This is the pure mechanics of why a sacral tilt affects cervical compression. No analogy required. The anatomy is the explanation. The history of how this connection was understood and then largely forgotten by mainstream practice adds weight to why so many people spend years treating the neck without lasting relief. Sacral angle measurement dates to the mid-19th century. European anatomists, working with cadaveric dissection long before radiographic imaging existed, recognized that the angle of the sacral plate correlated with spinal curvature patterns. But the clinical application of this observation waited over a century. In the 1980s and 1990s, Gilles Duval-Beaupère, a French physician at the Hôpital Raymond Poincaré, developed the concept of pelvic incidence, a fixed anatomical parameter that describes the relationship between the sacral end plate and the hip axis. Her work, published across several orthopedic journals through the 1990s, demonstrated that pelvic incidence is the single strongest predictor of spinal alignment. Individuals with high pelvic incidence develop different compensatory patterns than those with low pelvic incidence. The sacrum sets the template, and the spine follows. What Duval-Beaupère established, and this is the part that took decades to reach rehabilitation practice, is that you cannot meaningfully correct spinal alignment at any single segment without accounting for what the sacrum is doing. Spinal surgeons understood this. It changed how fusion procedures were planned. But the principle filtered into conservative treatment, into physiotherapy, in manual therapy, in daily self-care, with extraordinary slowness. The gap between surgical understanding and daily practice is where millions of people fell, treating the neck because the neck hurts, while the sacrum sat locked and unaddressed below. Think about the spine the way you'd think about a solar system. The sacrum is the central mass. Its gravitational field, its angle, determines the orbital path of every structure above it. The lumbar vertebrae are the inner planets. They orbit closest to the sacral center and are most immediately shaped by its pole. The thoracic vertebrae are the mid-range planets. They respond to the lumbar orbit and adjust accordingly. And the cervical spine, your neck, is the outermost planet. It sits at the far edge of the system, and because of that distance, it experiences the largest absolute displacement when the central mass shifts. A 2-degree change at the sacrum might produce a 5-degree change at the thoracic spine and a 12-degree change at the cervical spine. The further from the center, the greater the amplification. This is why neck treatments produce temporary relief. They're adjusting the outermost planet without addressing the gravitational field that pulled it off course. The planet drifts back because the field hasn't changed. The field is the sacrum. There's a kitchen version of this same principle that might land differently. Your spine is a stack of rising dough. Each vertebral segment is a layer, and the sacrum is the temperature of the oven. When the oven temperature is correct, each layer rises evenly. The loaf holds its shape from bottom to top. When the oven runs cold, when the sacrum locks in posterior tilt, the bottom layers collapse, the middle layers compensate by leaning, and the top layer, the one at the surface, buckles forward. You can reshape the top of the loaf all day. You can press it back, mold it, support it with your hands. The moment you let go, it falls forward again, because the oven temperature hasn't changed. Changing the temperature at the source, restoring the sacral angle, lets every layer reorganize from the bottom up. A man in his late 50s, a long-distance driver, had been managing neck tension with weekly massage for 3 years. Effective for about 48 hours each time. By Thursday, the compression was back. His massage therapist, after attending a pelvic mechanics continuing education course, assessed his sacral mobility and found almost zero movement at the sacroiliac joints. She shifted treatment focus entirely, sacral mobilization, no cervical work at all. By the 6th week, his massage visits dropped from weekly to monthly. But the change he described first wasn't in the neck, it was in his breathing. He could take a full breath without the sensation of something catching in his upper chest. The neck improvement came second, almost as a side effect. What had happened was that the thoracic spine, freed from compensating for the locked sacrum, had regained enough extension to allow full rib excursion. The neck decompression was downstream of that thoracic change, which was downstream of the sacral release. That breathing connection deserves a moment. When the sacrum locks posteriorly and the thoracic spine rounds forward to compensate, the rib cage loses its capacity to expand fully. Inspiration becomes shallow. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger a medical investigation, but enough to reduce oxygen exchange efficiency by a measurable margin. Habitual shallow breathing alters CO2 tolerance, shifts the autonomic nervous system towards sympathetic dominance, and increases baseline muscle tension throughout the posterior chain, including the neck. The neck stiffness that many people attribute to stress or posture or sleeping wrong may, in a significant number of cases, be downstream of a respiratory pattern that's downstream of a thoracic restriction that's downstream of a sacral lock. 4 levels of compensation between the perceived problem and its origin. For anyone over 60, there's an additional dimension: balance. The body's ability to maintain upright balance depends on the vestibular system, visual input, and proprioceptive feedback from the feet and spine. When the sacrum shifts and the compensatory cascade pulls the head forward, the center of mass migrates anterior to the base of support. The body compensates by bending the knees slightly, shifting weight to the toes, and increasing muscular effort to stay upright. Fall risk increases, not because of weakness, but because the postural foundation has shifted. Restoring sacral mobility doesn't replace balance training, but it removes one of the mechanical contributors to instability that balance training alone cannot address. For those managing a parent's mobility decline, this connection between sacral position and balance is worth understanding. The progressive forward stoop that so many associate with aging is not purely a muscular or skeletal degeneration. It is partly a compensatory cascade that begins at the pelvis. The sacrum locks, the thoracic spine rounds, the head pushes forward, and the center of gravity moves outside the stable base. The tailbone tilt won't reverse osteoporotic wedging or degenerative disc changes, but in cases where the postural shift is primarily compensatory rather than structural, it can restore degrees of upright posture that seemed permanently lost. The protocol adjustments for this population are specific. Slower movements, 15 seconds per hold rather than 30, building gradually. The supine version with the towel is the safest starting point because gravity assists and the floor provides proprioceptive feedback. The standing wall version is appropriate once the supine version feels comfortable, typically after 2 weeks. The seated version, counterintuitively, is the most demanding because it requires active muscular control of the tilt without gravitational assistance. It's the final progression, not the first. For anyone under 50 who sits more than 6 hours a day, the protocol emphasis shifts. The sacrum isn't degenerating, it's adapting to the seated position with progressive stiffness. The seated version at the desk becomes the primary intervention because it interrupts the pattern in the environment where the pattern develops. 90 seconds, 3 times during the workday. The mechanism is less about restoring lost mobility and more about preventing the progressive lock that accumulates over decades. The difference between addressing this at 45 and addressing it at 65 is the difference between prevention and rehabilitation. Both work, but one requires significantly less effort. What accumulates over those weeks is subtle. The neck doesn't suddenly release. What happens instead is that the range of motion in the cervical spine gradually increases without direct intervention. Head rotation improves. The sensation of compression at the base of the skull during long reading sessions diminishes. These changes arrive without announcement. Most people notice them retrospectively, when they realize they haven't reached for the neck pillow in 2 weeks, or when they turn to check a blind spot while driving and the movement is fluid instead of guarded. The spine is a 3.5 million year old engineering solution to the problem of standing upright on 2 legs. And the sacrum is where that solution begins. Every vertebra above it organized around its angle. Every postural pattern and expression of its position. And the neck, which absorbs the furthest consequences of every sacral shift, finally able to decompress when the sacrum underneath it finds its way back to the angle that the whole architecture was built around.